Welcome back, Frasier fans, to another Joyous and Jejune. This time, we're not looking at the A story, we are looking at the B story, the eighth episode in this latest season of Frasier. I am one of your hosts, Stu.
And I'm your other host, Alastair. What a fantastic start to our episode today, Stu. The B story in name, not nature, although there is a B story as ever present in this episode for us to dissect along with the A story. So what were your general thoughts on this one, Stu, before we get into the details?
Well, my first thought is that we need to give notice of spoilers.
Quick, before we ruin this episode for anyone.
Yeah, so just in case anybody's not seen the eighth episode of the new Frasier and don't want spoilers, look away, put the video on pause, go and watch it, and then come back and see if you agree with our picks. Um, so yeah, that's out of the way. So I mean, it's a great title because not only is the B story about a B story, it's also about a B story and about the B story. So, yeah,
They really went all in, yeah.
it works on so many levels. Uh, yeah, I was really really pleased with this episode for a number of different reasons. Yeah, I, yeah. Overall, a thumbs up. We'll be going into the details in a moment, but yeah, overall thumbs up. How about you?
I think I probably wasn't as keen on it as you. I wasn't. I didn't think it was bad, but I think we had a real few weeks of really good episodes, and maybe I'd been a bit spoiled by them, and then this one feels like just a little bit of a step down from the role things had been on. I think for me, so.
That is interesting because for me it was a step up from where it's been.
Oh, so is this your favorite so far, Stu, of the season?
It, hmm, I'm not sure.
It's up there somewhere.
Possibly. It's definitely,
Okay.
it would be in my top three, definitely. Um, yeah, I can, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it is my favorite at the moment. Hmm.
Okay. Well, this is the viewers. You're set for an interesting exchange of opinions here. So, since you are cheerleading this one, how about you kick us off with your joyous for the episode? Seems appropriate.
So it's overwhelmingly for me the most joyous aspect of this was the fact that it is such a fantastic David episode. It feels like, I mean, as anybody who's been watching the shows will know, I've not been a David fan so far. So to have such it felt like the character has like he's finally established himself. He's not just Niles Light, he's his own character, his own person. We got to see that. We got a huge amount of focus. Assuming that the David story is the B story, because the series is Frasier after all, it actually felt like to me like the B story overshadowed the A story quite a bit. Um, I thought it was a fantastic Freddy episode as well, for a number of reasons. Um, yeah, that's where I am with it. It's a bit less tangible than I would normally do, but just the fact it was such a good David episode, and it's great to see a good David episode.
I think a lot of
Um,
people will be feeling the same, and actually, funnily, I do. In spite of saying that I'm not as keen on this episode, I do agree with you that the some of the characterization we get for David and Freddie in this episode is really great. And if you're good, I will launch into my Joyous because that's quite a nice segue into my
Please
list
do.
here. So, and the where I'm in agreement with you is that I think the character building for particularly for David, but also for Freddie in this is good. And where that really shines is the scene where they discuss the expectations of being Crane boys and growing up in that family. And it's nice, it's nice to have a reasonably serious conversation. I mean, there is comedy in it, but it's quite it's quite poignant and then quite heartfelt from both characters. Their struggles growing up with the expectations of their fathers on them. I think that scene in particular is really excellent and does a lot of character building for both the Crane sons. So thumbs up for that, definitely for me as well. And it was nice to see David's study buddies. I think Zara is her name back briefly in the episode. So
Yeah,
I wasn't necessarily expecting that we'd see her again after her appearance, her great appearance for a few seconds in that one episode. So yeah, good to see that she's possibly going to be a recurring character on the show as time goes on.
absolutely. And it was great to see where where David lives as well. I'm guessing he's in like halls of residence or something. It's got that
It
sort of
looks
vibe,
it
hasn't
looked
it?
kind of like that, didn't it? Yeah.
What did you think of like the posters on the wall, the great big musical keyboard off to one side, the state of the place generally? What did you
I was
make of
really
that?
impressed by his extremely noisy printer that he has in his house.
Yeah,
Did anyone else notice that that printer was, that was loud? I
very
think one of the things that,
1980s.
yeah, I found one of the things that I felt a little bit hard to invest too much in that setting for David because we don't know a lot about it, and I think you're absolutely right that it felt like kind of student halls, and it wasn't particularly clear necessarily whether anyone lived with him or like how much this space was representing just his own domain and his own things. So yeah, I maybe didn't make as much of it in general as you used to. Did you pick a couple of things out with your eagle eye that either kind of tick the yes or no box?
I spotted things that I wouldn't have expected. I mean, you'd have expect like this neat, meticulously, everything, in its place. I wouldn't have expected posters on the walls. I'd have expected artwork, that kind of thing. So it actually made David more amenable, in my view.
A bit more human.
Bit more human,
Yeah.
absolutely. Things like the poster of Shakespeare saying willpower and that kind of thing. And another thing that it's a silly little thing, definitely humanized David for me. He and I have the same laundry basket.
I love it.
His is dark blue, mine's light grey, but other than that, they are identical.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Other washing baskets are available.
they are. I mean, I've also got Sheldon's t-shirt folder, but that's a whole other thing.
So, how about, do you want to kick us off for your Jejune for this episode? So, I presume this maybe not as much for you, Stu, since you were fairly keen on
I've got two Jejune moments, and a kind of like I suppose a minor disappointment as well. The disappointment being not enough Alan.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can all agree with
oh.
that one at this point. I think it's safe to say, yeah.
Um, I wouldn't call that a Jejune though. That's just a I'd have liked there to have been more. Frasier chasing this professorship really felt utterly wrong to me because, as is pointed out in the episode, people spend years teaching before they get the title of professor bestowed upon them. And he's been there, what, a couple of weeks?
But Stu, this is a man who just buys entire apartment blocks now. No wonder he's disappointed he can't get a professorship in a week.
Yeah. I don't know whether that's just like utter entitlement or what it is, but I suppose it's not so much the concept that he was chasing it as he was being humored on it.
Yeah,
It's like that should just be a flat no.
yeah,
And that should be
yeah,
the
yeah.
end of that story. I mean, granted, there's no comedy in that, there's no actual story to follow through, but that, yeah, it felt like a non-story. It felt like somebody doesn't understand. Well, they do. That's the thing. It's not that somebody doesn't understand how things work in a place of learning like that. They do because they mention it in the show.
Yeah,
I've
and I
still
think
got to head with it.
there's something that's very jarring between old Frasier and new Frasier, where it feels like we've stepped into a different version of the reality of Frasier, right? The same characters populate the new Frasier world, but how the world works in relation to our own real world outside of the TV show is quite different. And people are a bit more caricatured, situations are a bit more caricatured. It's all like dialed up a bit, and I think that is a perfect example in this episode of one of those moments where in old Frasier, you probably would have had him receive a no and have the plot take off in some entirely different direction, or sometimes what they would do with that is set up the idea of he has to step into a professorship to briefly fill it, and his ego is inflated, and then the episode unfolds to demonstrate why you don't get a professorship in a week, and how it doesn't work out for him. And yeah, I think it's nice. Yeah, nice to pick up on that and kind of highlight that Frasier 2023 seems to have a different rule book to to old Frasier and to our own world, certainly. Yeah.
That's I think that's a very relevant way of looking at it. It's the difference between a narrative on the world and a sitcom.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's
But
a
we shouldn't see it all negatively, because it is part of the reason why Alan works in Frasier and would have probably been quite odd in the original Frasier run. So
yes, I can definitely see that. Um, the other Jejune for me was Frasier, as has been hammered home to us so many times now, is a medical professional, and he's ignoring the medical advice on the amphetamines. I was going to say the anaphylactic medication. Um, yeah, he's a medical professional. He that wouldn't happen.
yeah,
I
and
suppose it's
again, so
part of
to
the
to
same
put to put
thing.
the to put the question to you, Stu, do you think it's something that they would have probably handled differently in old Frasier again? Can you imagine that being played out the same way in the original run?
So one scene from the original run that did spring to mind, and it was about Niles, and obviously Niles and Frasier, both medical professionals, and it's when Martin was trying to get Niles to write him a prescription, and he even faked Niles being pulled over by a cop, and he was going to get a ticket,
Yes.
and it's like, yeah, you have to write me this prescription really great. It's like, it turns out Niles had drawn him a picture of a dog on this prescription
Yes.
because he's a medical professional, and you don't just write prescription because you're a medical professional. And yeah, so that scene sprang to mind. It's not that kind of original Frasier didn't have its silly moments or its farcical moments, but it also felt like it had its feet on the ground. Like even the most like outlandish moments were still grounded. It
Totally
feels a
agree with
bit
you, Stu.
more
Yeah.
free floaty. Yeah, I feel like I've talked a lot there.
Well, from my Jejune, I think I'm in agreement with you, and would probably sort of take your points a bit further, or maybe sort of notice things in a similar vein that frustrated me with this episode. I thought that even as a joke, Freddie withholding the EpiPen from Frasier was needlessly far and in that scene, and kind of just felt a little bit bereft of alternative ideas of how to ratchet up the tension that were more, again, as you're saying, sort of believable or a bit more grounded. And consequently, I think often when we're talking about frustrations with things being more grounded or a bit more realistic, we're talking about the just being able to invest more in the characters and their situations, right? It can still be funny if it's fanciful or seems a bit extreme or whatever, but to have it in the same episode where you have quite a heartfelt, pretty serious conversation between the two cousins about the weight of growing up in that family, it sort of amplifies how jarring these things are. So, and I felt that this episode was just plagued a bit by this. I agree with you on the professorship story, just feeling kind of over-egged, feeling quite overly formulaic. Sort of feeling like this is the kind of these are the kind of steps that you would put Frasier through, and it sort of didn't, as a result, feel like much took you by surprise. You sort of knew the beats that were going to happen as that story unfolded, roughly speaking. And there was, I felt that some of the writing in this was just a bit sort of a bit flat after the last couple. I thought that some of the jokes that we banged all night, the paper route joke from David was just totally needless and sort of a bit blah. And there was some of the writing in the bar scene at the start. I thought this was maybe the worst episode for Freddy's firefighter friends. The little sort of chorus that they form in a lot of the episodes just felt like it was going through the motions, and I wasn't keen on the Freddy gets drunk and gets smart story the way it was done either. It's not that I don't like the idea, I just felt it was quite sort of sluggish and a bit contrived to fit the he writes David's essays for him moments in the story. And yeah, a lot of it didn't click for me in the way that recent episodes had clicked. It felt like it wasn't firing on as many cylinders as the wonderful Lilith episode last week, or even the couple before that as well, where it felt like it had gotten on a little roll. So not that there wasn't anything to like about this one, there was definitely, but there were too many bits and pieces here and there just not working for me. And I think actually your point about Alan's a great one. Alan is Alan goes through the stereotypes Alan beats from the first couple of episodes of Alan doesn't care about his students. There's the joke about, but I've got my, what's the line where he goes, I've got to class, but I've not got my shoes on, so I won't be going to it or whatever. Yeah. And there's the Alan is a drunk where he's going to say hello to Frasier at the table, clearly completely blotto, and the faculty member Frasier who's trying to impress has just said that he doesn't want any drunk members of staff around the students giving a bad impression, and Frasier shoos them away. And these are uses of Alan that we were moaning about by episode 2 or 3, let alone episode 8 that we're on to now, where actually we've had some really good moments for Alan, where we've moved away from that kind of just sort of recycling of those two jokes. So I will stop there, but that was my Jejune moments for this episode.
No, I think that's a great observation about Alan, and kind of to expand on that a little bit. The way we've been talking, it feels very much like he's written as a two-dimensional character, but Nicholas Lyndhurst is giving him that third dimension. And when
Yeah.
he's not got much to do, it's almost impossible for him to create that third dimension. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, he's really stretched in this episode to do it, and it's a shame. I'm sure we'll see him back in action again next episode. But this episode was not kind to him, and I think the laziness of writing for him was representative of problems with not great writing elsewhere in the episode for me as well. So. Yeah, which
I
is funny
think.
because my best line comes from a really nicely written scene in this episode. The shame it wasn't more like this.
Oh, right. Well, we'll. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was. Yeah, in
Do you
terms
have
of
more?
the writing,
Do you
I'll
have more?
say this
More
very quickly.
Alan? Yeah, yeah, go for
Very quickly.
it.
Yeah, the writing, it feels heavy-handed. It feels like the writers they're not trusting the audience. Yeah, it's like, and we're going to tell a joke now. It's just I
Yeah,
feel they need to just relax, trust the audience, let the joke just land. You don't have to
that's
sort of slam it to the floor.
perfect way to put it, Stu. And after our best lines, I do have a rare. You sometimes have a noteworthy moment, and I have a noteworthy moment this week that is going to pick up on that point again. So we can come back to that kind of like a little bit sort of over the top sitcom feeling clunkiness in this one. But before then, what was your favorite line from this week?
Oh no, I want to hear yours first.
So I actually went with a really serious one. There's we're talking about. I think the one thing that we can agree on in this episode is that the scene between David and Freddie, where they're talking about the way of growing up in the Crane family, is really nicely done. It's a nice piece of writing. Two guys perform the scene really well together. And so my favorite line from this week is actually a really serious one, which is the line where Freddie just says, "I coped until one day I couldn't." Which I thought was just like a really poignant, nice little kind of emotional gut punch for that character. And I think there's so much. One of the things I loved about that scene was that it's not over egged. That line is not sort of delivered to then a silent, stunned room for the next few seconds or something. And yeah, so much of so many of the questions that we had about how Freddie had wound up where he was when the show started at the beginning of this season. There's a lot of suggestion of backstory snuck into the way that line is written and delivered, and you kind of get to it's a little sort of deeper dig into that character's life experience between when we saw him in the Frasier original run and where he is now. So that gets a thumbs up from me this week. I think that was the best scene of the episode, and so I went with what I thought was the best line from that for line of the week.
I think that's a really good choice. A really good choice because I think that make us as the audience, it allows us to connect with, because we've all been in those sorts of situations, yeah, where you just like you struggle, and one day you can't anymore. So we've all been there, which is quite rare for Freddie. We're not all geniuses who were educated at private school, then went to Harvard and, became hunky firefighters thereafter. I mean, some of us become hunky actors, but that's a whole other thing. But there is little to relate to about Freddie. He's putting on this everyman kind of thing, but he's not. He's as far from an everyman as it can get. So that moment, made him infinitely more relatable to us.
Yeah, really good way to put it. Really good way to put it, Stu. Yeah, yeah.
So that is a really, really good choice. much better than my choice now.
What do you have for
Ah,
us?
damn it! I should
Something
have.
a bit more lighthearted. Yeah.
Um, yes and no. So
Okay.
this is all credit to the actor, I think, and actually, no, I think credit to the writers as well for this. Um, it's a line that is delivered for laughs, yet I find incredibly moving and poignant and important to understand. Is when Freddie is, and I know you didn't like this scene. I actually didn't dislike the concept of it. When Freddie's drunk at the bar, being intelligent, the specific line I've picked out is when he's talking about, well, it's his review of Finding Nemo, and he's talking about Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard saying that life is struggle, and purpose of life is struggle, and when you've completed your struggle, when life has no meaning basically, and I think that's a yeah, I so I've had times when I've gone through issues in my life and I have sort of almost unconsciously created struggles to give my life more purpose. So I can like thoroughly relate to that. And yeah, just because Finding Nemo is a kid's film doesn't mean to say you can't have those deep, like important philosophical points to make. So anyway, yeah, so that
It's
line
really interesting, isn't it, that both
resonated.
of us went for Freddie
Mm,
lines this episode. And I think, yeah, it is a great it's a good episode for his character, it's a good episode for David's character. And I think giving if these actors get a couple more years in these roles, if the writing evens out and steps up a little bit, episodes like this one could potentially be a real treat to watch and proper winners a little bit down the line. There's glimmers of TV greatness here, but it's a for me it's a very 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 mixed and an uneven episode. But with both I don't think we've had an episode yet where both of us picked favorite lines from Freddie for a start. So it goes to show that the show's doing something in this episode.
Definitely. I mean, I think we've both had Freddie lines, haven't we? But just not at the
Never at the
same
same time.
time.
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
That sounds right. Not that I keep a tally of things, but yeah, that does sound right. That does
You
sound
can let
right.
us know in the comments, viewers. Did we once have
Yeah.
one before? Don't think so. Alan usually Rob's best line. So,
Oh, definitely.
shall I give you my noteworthy before we wrap up for
Yeah.
the episode,
Yeah, I
Stu?
want to hear this.
So, our viewers this side of the pond are maybe a little bit more likely to understand this reference, although I'm sure that David Mitchell and Robert Webb have their fans in plenty in the States as well and around the world. So so often Frasier 2023, one of the criticisms you'll see from people who aren't as keen on it is this idea that it's a bit over the top as a sitcom, that the laugh track can be a bit overbearing, that some of the humor is a bit dialed up to nine and sort of a little shy. Some might even go as far as to say a bit cliche for a sitcom. Now, I've thoroughly enjoyed this season of Frasier. I would much rather we had this Frasier than no Frasier at all. However, I did have to laugh when I spotted a recycled Mitchell and Webb gag appear in this episode where I can't be the only one who sees the similarities between the Lazy Susan Hennemore sketch from Mitchell and Webb, where there is there's a joke about items being on a lazy Susan and being spun round so you can't tell which is which. And for people who aren't familiar with Mitchell and Webb, it's a series of comedy skits, and one of the skits they do is called Hennemore, which is about a hapless employee who is given invariably impossible tasks to carry out by his overbearing boss, which he bungles in some way, usually thanks to how impossible they are to execute in the first place. And the whole thing is a joke on sort of over the top sitcoms in the first place. And here in this episode, we have the lazy Susan alcohol and coffee. Oh, it's spun round. You don't know what cup it is. Gag going on. And my mind immediately snapped back to that Michelin Web look and the lazy Susan Hennemore gag. So, yeah, sorry, Frasier, but that time, I guess you lived up to expectations.
That is an amazing spot. I had forgotten the Hennemore gag.
I loved the Hennemore gags in that
I
show. They did a little series over the course of it. They're so good.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, I absolutely. I mean, I love the Michelin Web look. Anymore. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. I can't believe I missed that. Yeah, that was a brilliant spot. Um. It wasn't the only recycled joke in this episode, though.
Hit us with it, Stu. What did you spot?
Something that came very close to a jejune for me was the reusing of a joke that had previously been done in Frasier. Now, reason it didn't make Jejune is 11 years of Frasier. That's a lot of jokes. Sooner or later, there's going to be an amount of recycling, I'm sure. But the whole Dada joke, I've forgotten how it was put in the episode, but it was about Freddie's first words being
yeah,
Dada.
oh, David's first words at the
David.
Met. Yes, yeah.
That's right, and yes, and Frasier had made the joke to Lilith that I'd made a joke that and I thought Freddie was some sort of art savant when his first word was Dada, but Lilith burst my bubble by just saying he was probably referring to me.
Stu, great catch. And I think actually, yeah, that is just it is a bit of recycling, isn't it? Yeah, good spot. Yeah.
Two recyclings of each
Yeah,
salted one.
to give the Frasier writers the benefit of the doubt, I suspect it's not a direct lift from Michelin Web, but rather a coincidental similarity. However, it did tickle me that it popped up this week.
I wouldn't um I wouldn't discount readily the idea that the writers watch British comedy. British comedy is like renowned worldwide.
Sorry, absolutely. I'm definitely not saying that they wouldn't watch that, but just rather a reference to, I mean, Michelin Web being a devastatingly long time ago in terms of making me feel old. Since probably about 15 years or something since that was airing. But yeah, so more on that count. But anyway, that pretty much does it for me for this episode. How about you?
As it does me, although I did use the phrase only 15 years ago in conversation earlier today. So there we go.
And if you like
Oh,
things that were only 15 years ago, you'll love our upcoming look at the latest Doctor Who episode where the stars of the show from about 15 years ago return to the screen once again.
oh yes, yes. We'll be having a conversation about that shortly. In a different video. But yes. Yes, especially about it, the 15-year gap. That was shocking. Um, but yes, that is going to be it for us for the Joyous and Jejune until we're going to be getting together sometime between Christmas and New Year to review the final two episodes 9 and 10. Basically, life's getting in the way and stuff's happening. It's a busy old time of year for both of us. So, yeah.
Consider it our Christmas present. Once all the mince pies are eaten and Santa's been and gone, you will have Joyce and Jejune weeks after the fact catching up on your beloved final two Frasier episodes, one of which is going to have Perry Gilpin as Roz in, which I'm still so excited for. So that'll be a real treat to be back and talking about that then.
Definitely, definitely. So until then, happy holidays and good night, YouTube, and good mental health.
Bye.